We're here in Austin, Texas, getting ready to take one of Black Austin Tour's downtown experiences, which centers the experiences and contributions of Black people in this city. We'll be checking out the state capitol, the Heman Sweatt Travis County Courthouse, the Woolridge Square, Congress Avenue, and 6th Street. Let's go, y'all. Black Austin Tours is a company I started to, as people come into the city, to give them a little bit of the real of this city. Here at the Texas State Capitol, which is probably the most iconic building in the entire state, I would argue. Here we really get this idea everything is bigger in Texas. Why? Because at one point in time, this was actually one of the largest buildings in the world at its height. So what's important to know about the Texas State Capitol, which many people don't know, it's kind of highlighted if you look at the memorial behind us. You'll see some individuals that are in prison uniforms. Well, the state of Texas didn't have the necessary funds to construct the edifice that it wanted. So what happened? They actually started leasing incarcerated people a part of the convict leasing system. So hundreds of men, women, and even children, some as young as 12, were listed as convicts. And they were incarcerated many times for doing nothing. And they were employed or leased out to construct the materials that were needed for the state capitol. The use of incarcerated labor through the convict leasing system, which disproportionately impacted Black people, but Black men specifically, is a history that this state has to reckon with, especially as it relates to this iconic Capitol building that is the symbol of Texas, the symbol of freedom. But freedom for who? Now we're off to our next spot, Woolridge Square. Let's go, y'all. June 19, 1865, 2 years following the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln, enslaved African people in the state of Texas were liberated from bondage. But also on that same day, June 19, 1865, Reverend Jacob Fontaine was ordained in this city. He dedicated himself, as many other formerly enslaved African people that were newly becoming African Americans by law in a very limited way, set out to create communities. And Woolridge Square here in Austin is definitely one of those spaces for us to think about. There were churches that surrounded this park. They set the first historically Black college west of the Mississippi River in 1872, Paul Quinn College, right around these squares. In 1911, Booker T. Washington, who wrote the book Up From Slavery, because the state legislator decided that he could not talk at the state capitol building. But he decided to address the crowd here, to address segregation and to address Black people and say that we have to do something. Reconstruction was the period that followed emancipation. At the end of the Reconstruction era, we entered into what we think of in the United States we commonly call Jim Crow, the Jim Crow racial segregation, Black codes. Every aspect of life in this city was governed by Jim Crow segregation. And it was places like these, Heman, Marion, Sweatt, Travis County Courthouse, where the state of Texas upheld racial segregation. Until the fact of 1946, when Heman, Marion, Sweatt, a well-accomplished African-American man, wanted to attend the University of Texas at Austin to become a lawyer. This is the place where he brought suit against the head of the University of Texas system. It took people like Heman, Marion, Sweatt challenging the system at its core to hold this state accountable, to make sure that all people, including Black people, had the opportunity to enjoy and participate in a fair and equal way in this country. So I'm grateful, and I think everybody needs to come check this place out. This is where history is made. Here on Congress Avenue, probably the most well-known thoroughfare in the city of Austin that runs from the state capitol steps all the way to the river and past. This entire block was segregated based on race. But this is also the place over time in the 1960s, at the different lunch counters, at the different department stores that were racially segregated on this street. This is where many African Americans in the 1950s and 1960s staged sit-ins to demand that their rights and humanity be recognized and be able to go into places. It was even places like the Paramount Theater that were racially segregated, that did not allow African Americans or black people to come in and take part and enjoy any of the shows. So in the 1960s, they had stand-ins, they picketed, they demanded the Paramount Theater to rid itself of the racial segregation policies that denied the access of African Americans and black people to this establishment. We're here on 6th Street in Austin, Texas. It's probably the most famous street in the entire city of Austin, if not the state. It's where Austin really gets the idea of being the live music capital of the world. But there's some deeper things about this street. We gotta understand, how did it actually come to be? Because in the city, in the Jim Crow South that was racially segregated, many African Americans weren't allowed to engage in business on places like Congress Avenue. So places like East 6th Street, there were a number of black-owned businesses on this street. Before it became 6th Street, it was Pecan Street. I mean, you had black realtors, there were black physicians like Dr. John Stevens, who's largely thought to be Austin's first black physician that actually practiced in the building right behind us here on the corner throughout the entire street. So you might be asking yourself, what happened to all the black businesses that were once located here on 6th Street? In 1928, the city of Austin decided that it wanted to reserve its most prominent and pristine spaces for white people. It made African Americans and some Mexican Americans live on the east side of Interstate I-35. And now that Austin is such a popular destination and many people want to be downtown, want to come out on 6th Street, enjoy downtown, now white people actually want to live down here again. So what happens? Because of that, we're now being displaced. Because our land value, our property value is starting to rise very high. It's hard for us to keep up on the taxes. So many people gotta go. So as Austin, as a beautiful city as it is, and as much fun as you can have when you come here, you have to remember that some individuals, people like myself, families who've been here for nearly 200 years, we experience this city in a very different way. Thank y'all for coming out and taking a tour with Travel+Leisure and Black Austin Tours. I'm Javier Wallace, owner and guide of Black Austin Tours, and I can't wait to see you here next time in Austin, Texas, so we can take a Black Austin tour walk downtown together.